Okay, in this series of videos, I'm going to digitize this frog and use both auto digitizing and manual digitizing and show you a few tools to improve the actual outcome of your design. So we can use auto digitizing to quickly digitize, but there are ways you can make it stitch out better and have a better final result even before you do your test sew. So make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of the series, so you can actually get a really nice frog at the end. Okay, so without further ado, we'll move on and get started. Okay, let's digitize this little frog. When I say little, it's quite big, but we can make it whatever size we would like. This image is from Open Clip Art, and I'll put a link below so you can download the image and follow along. Now, I'm going to download the PNG bitmap because not everybody has the ability to open an SVG. Only Designer Plus people can open an SVG in their art canvas, but everybody can open a PNG bitmap. And this is a really clean image, so there's no great advantage of getting the SVG unless you want to play around with the image editing, etc. But it's a nice little image to work with, and Open Clip Art is exactly what it says. You can actually use these images on this site for commercial use. There's no restrictions at all, so that's really great. So I always download the largest image because it's much easier to shrink an image than it is to enlarge it. You don't get as much distortion shrinking an image as you do when you enlarge one. You can get problems. So I'm going to just, well, I've already done it, but to download it, you would click on the word large. This is an ad. Just be careful and close that ad, and this image will come up. This is what you're looking for. And all you do then is right click on it and save the image as, and that will open a dialog where you can choose where you want to save it to on your computer and save the design, and it will download to that spot. So I'm not going to do it because I've already done it, so I'll just click off. I'll close that website, and here is my frog, and I put it in a clip art folder under a folder called animals, but you can put it wherever you like. I'll just close that again too because I opened that before I started recording and I didn't need to. Okay, because I want to show you that you can just insert your image. So come up here to insert artwork, or in the auto digitize you can also insert artwork, and that will open this dialog. Navigate up here to where you've saved your image, select the image, and I always make sure I have all artwork files there just in case it's a format that other than a bitmap, so it could have, or other than a PNG, so that I make sure I can see my images, and just click open, and there's our frog. Now I mentioned I always get the largest image. This one is actually 685.02 millimeters wide. That's 68 centimeters, nearly 70 centimeters wide, huge, and even taller. So the first thing I'm going to do is alter the size. Now I really only want one about 7 centimeters wide, so that's about 10%. So if I can reduce this image to 10% really quickly because we've got a percentage option here. So make sure your lock's locked, which will mean that your image will scale proportionately, and just change one of these to 10 in the percentage options and click on enter, and that will reduce it down to 10% of the original size. But if you want to make it a different size, that's entirely up to you. You can actually, with your lock locked, choose a width or a height that you want to work with, and scale it proportionately to the size you want. It's always better to size your image first. I'll just zoom in now. Well, let's go to fit. So that's this little zoom to fit icon up here that will fill the screen. It's always better to size the image to roughly at least to what you want for your finished embroidery, because it's much better to not have to resize your embroidery if possible. The software does a pretty good job, but we don't want extreme resizing of embroideries. There can be problems with certain things like satin outlines, etc., because the width of them changes. Okay, so we've got our image at the size we want, and now it's time to digitize. Now, as I said, this is a really clean image. So to speed things up, to save us from clicking around every little object, we can use our auto digitizing tools. They will give us a good starting point. I'm reluctant to just auto digitize. We will first up, so I can show you the sorts of issues you will encounter with auto digitizing. Okay, so this is a bitmap. There's no stitches there yet. So we can either prepare our bitmap, as I've mentioned in previous videos, or we can click on one of the auto digitizers and it will open that prepare bitmap dialog anyway. So let's just well, the instant auto digitizer won't. Let's just instant auto digitize and see what result we get. So I've clicked on that. And it's not too bad. I've got one satin leg over here. Everything else is a fill stitch. I've got satin in the eyes. And I've got, looks like a satin stitch around the outside as well. So, and for the mouth. So we can work with this. Let's put the grid on for a minute to have a look at how long these satin stitches are. There's a couple of ways we can find out. I don't like satin stitches to be too long. So let's have a look. If we put our grid on, by default, the grid is 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters, 1 centimeter square. If you go to inches, up here you can change, you can work in inches or metric. If you go to inches, which is just by clicking on US, the grid won't really change. It will just convert it to inches. So how we know the size of the grid is by right-clicking on the grid icon. And so 0.39 of an inch is obviously 1 centimetre. So if I go back to let's just close that for a minute. If I go back to metric, you see the squares didn't change size, and if I right click on the grid, it will now show 10 millimeters, which is 1 centimeter. I prefer to digitize in metric because it's much easier to get fine adjustments with metric. You can go to a hundredth of a millimetre if necessary, whereas inches is a bit, the units of inches is a bit more clumsy. So it's harder to get a finer adjustment. So if you're used to only inches and you can't visualise how long this is, start digitizing in metric now and continue on, and gradually you'll start to get some idea of the relationship between the sizes. But if you really can't do it, then go to inches if you can visualize better in inches. What you want is a satin stitch that's probably not longer than 4 or 5 millimeters. That's about the longest you'd want. So half a centimeter. Otherwise, your satin stitches start to get a bit long, and then there is a satin special where it will add extra stitches in, but it won't. It could sometimes look a bit funny. So for now, we're going to try and keep our satin stitches below or round about the 5 millimeter mark. Okay, so I'm just going to close that now and zoom in here, and I'm going to turn it off true view, so I could hit T on my keyboard or click on this icon here, and I can see the grid lines here now more clearly this way. I could also hide the image by clicking on this icon, and I can see the grid lines even more clearly. So here's the bottom of a square. I'll just zoom out a little bit, and the square goes up to here. So these long satin stitches here are probably 5.5, maybe 6. It's not too bad. That would be the longest I would have my satin stitches. Now they do radiate out. The software did quite a good job of that and made it nicely radiate out around that shape. So that's why you've got these shorter stitches here, because if they all came all the way down, you'd have a lot of needle penetrations all in the one spot. So the software works that out as well. So they're not too bad. I would be happy to leave that. Okay, so let's go back to True View. The satin stitch around the mouth, we've got separate, well, it isn't separate objects, I don't think. Let's just go to, yeah, individual, that's color blocks. And if I click on here again, I'll go back to individual objects. And if I go down here, this is actually showing as one object, but it has got the different directions at the ends of the mouth, and I'm quite happy with that as well. What I'm not happy with is underneath the mouth. If I go out of True View, there is actually a gap in the green stitching. Now, two things I don't like about that is that you may find that this causes you to actually be able to see the fabric through on the edges if you get a lot of pull on the fabric when you're stitching. So there is a danger of that with such a narrow object and a gap there. It should cover, because the software does put a 0.4mm pull compensation in by default. But the other reason I don't like this is because every time you have a gap, the software has to redirect the fill, or not redirect it, but travel around that gap. And that causes extra unnecessary stitching. It actually causes more stitching than if the gap was filled in. So we can sort that out easily by clicking off and selecting that green background. So I just need to go into the colour film, and there it is. And you can see there are gaps under where the eyes are as well. So if I select that green background, there is a tool in the software called the Reshape tool. And when you click on that, it's the third one along from the left on this row here, it will actually put in all the nodes of that shape. And as you can see, there are lots, whoops, I'm just trying to zoom in here to the mouth. There are lots and lots of nodes defining that shape underneath the mouth. Those nodes around the mouth are not defining the black stitching for the mouth, they're defining the gap underneath. And so we can actually select all of those nodes and delete them, and that will get rid of the hole. So we can box select as many nodes as we can while we're in the Reshape tool. You want to be careful you don't select nodes from the outside line or the eye. So start about here and create a box. That will get quite a few. There we go. They've all selected, and we can delete those. And you can just continue on box selecting as many nodes as you can without selecting the other ones. So I'm just creating a few boxes, and then this one here. And each time I'm hitting my delete button. So now there's no gap under there. Okay, so here I am in Designer Plus, and yes, I've selected the green head just the same as in the creator level. And here is the hole. You can see in the Reshape tool, I've got a hole here outlined for the mouth. And of course, I have got holes where the eyes are, and you can see that on the colour film. If the colour film was a little bit bigger, you might be able to see the hole for the mouth. let me see. Yes, you can just see. So to adjust your colour film, just hover over this edge till you get the double-headed arrow and left click and drag it to the width you want. So now I can see that hole where the mouth is. Now there is a tool in Designer Plus that allows you to remove holes from an object. So you haven't got that in Creator, so you have to manually remove the hole as I showed you. But we can just, in Designer Plus, we can just remove the hole here. It will also remove the holes for the eyes, but I was going to do that anyway, so it's not a problem. So we'll just remove holes. And now that face is one solid object. Okay, so I'll go back to the creator level now. Well, actually, I'll continue in the Designer Plus level, but I will point out, if you haven't got the tool, I'll point out how to do it in the creator level. So we've now got no hole underneath the mouth, so we're not going to get any gaps, but we do not need any underlay under that mouth because we've already got all that stitching for the face. So we only need to stitch directly on top of it. So we can go to that object of the mouth and select it. I'll see if I can select it. Yes, I'm still in the reshape tool, so I'll go to the select tool. So I've selected just the mouth there, and down here we can remove the underlay with one quick click on the underlay settings icon. And so now that's got no underlay. There is a travel stitch in there, but that's fine. Okay, so we'll go back to true view. It still looks fine, but we now won't get any gaps there, and this will just stitch on top. Now, of course, if you'd have thought beforehand that you didn't want holes in that object, instead of using the I'll just go into the auto digitize tools. Instead of using the instant auto digitize, you could have used the magic wand fill without holes. That would require you to actually click in every object and decide what you wanted to do. So it's really a matter of, well, let's just bring up the image again in a new tab. So I'll get a new design. And I'll load that image again. There he is. Open him up. Okay, so if I've got him selected, instead I would use the magic wand fill without holes. So that is this one here. When I click on that, I do have to prepare the bitmap. So I click on the image as well, and it's going to bring up the prepare bitmap. Now, so this is an extra step, whereas the instant auto digitize went straight through. So it's a matter of deciding which way is going to work best for you, but knowing all the ways means you can think about that before you start. So in this case, it's selected the black, green and white. Just keep hovering past if you think there's white in the design, and you'll see a blue line come around the white square, otherwise you wouldn't know it was there. So that's okay. I'm just going to go okay. And now I can hover over each area. So for instance, if I choose magic wand fill without holes, I can hover over the green face, and although it's showing the holes where the eyes and mouth are in the mesh, when I click on it, it actually creates a solid object with no holes. So I could then go on and fill the other areas with that same tool. There are no holes in the other areas. There's shapes, but there are no holes. So I can go on and fill those areas. And I'm in colour blocks over here, but I'm getting separate objects for each of these. Let me just go into individual objects. So they're my two outer back legs, and there's my body with the front legs, and there's the head. Now I can go in and get the wand, the magic wand, because I don't want the blacks of the eyes to, it's just, oh, I didn't, you know what I didn't do? I didn't shrink this down, so it's a huge image, but I'll get in a little bit closer so we can see. So that I don't want the blacks of the eyes to fill all completely in, so I need to get back just to the magic wand for the blacks of the eyes. But let's do the whites first. So I'll just hover over till I can get the whites of the eyes. There's one. and it's going to fill with a fill stitch because it's a much bigger area than in the small frog we did, but you get the general idea. And then I can do the blacks of the eyes, so I need to try and get the mesh of that. I'll zoom in even further if I can. There we are, and hover over here. It's actually struggling. This is such a big design. There we go. I've got the black now, so I can click on that. And there is the black on that side. I'll click on that. And I'll go back to True View. I haven't done the mouth, but you get the general idea. So knowing what each of these tools does allows you to make decisions about how you're going to digitize your design. I'll just close that now. So then you wouldn't have to remove the holes at all. I don't want to save that one, no. Okay, so we're back at our little small frog, which is going to work, behave much better, much quicker. So in summary, if you've got holes in an object, if you haven't digitized without holes, use the magic wand fill without holes, and you've gone ahead and used a different tool, and you've got the holes and you want to remove them, in Create a Level you'll need to go into the Reshape tool and box select the nodes of the hole and delete it, and that way you can delete only one hole. If you didn't want to delete the holes under the eyes, you could just delete one hole. So in Designer Plus level, you can use let's go into the Edit toolbox here. You can use the Remove Holes tool, but it will remove all holes. So knowing how to delete those nodes of holes is good if you only want to remove one hole. So I hope that makes sense. And in the next video, we'll talk a little bit more about actually the type of stitches and what we're going to do in the eye area. Thank you.